Hey everyone, welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today
Cool.
into Melinda Gates and leadership.
Okay.
We found this draft script for a podcast
Okay.
and a workbook that goes with it that connect her work to something called Heartfelt Leadership. Have you heard of this before?
I've heard, the general idea of like leading with empathy,
Right.
but a whole framework, not so much.
Yeah, this heart thing seems super interesting.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to dig in and see what we can learn from all this.
Me too. It'll be interesting to see how they connect it all together.
Okay, so first,
Yeah.
Melinda Gates, obviously super well known because of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Right.
But what's interesting here is how these sources emphasize it's not just the money,
Okay.
it's really her leadership. Like, she's driving things.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get to that level of impact by just signing checks, right?
Exactly. The source even uses the word galvanized to describe her impact.
Wow.
So clearly she's a force.
Definitely. So how does this all connect to the heart framework then?
Yeah, let's break it down.
Okay.
H is for holistic understanding.
Gotcha. So what does that mean in this context?
So it's about seeing the whole picture,
Right.
not just focusing on one little piece of a problem.
So like looking at the root causes.
Exactly, and seeing how all these different factors are connected.
Okay, I can see that.
And the source specifically mentions Melinda's focus on women and girls.
Right. That makes sense.
It's not just about giving them, like, one specific thing they need. It's about empowering them as whole people within their communities.
Yeah, that fits with the whole holistic idea.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah. And that leads us to E,
Okay. E.
which is empathetic engagement.
So what does that look like in action?
Well, the source really emphasizes listening.
Interesting. Not just coming in with solutions.
No, it's about truly hearing and understanding different perspectives.
Oh, I see. That's got to be especially crucial for the Gates Foundation, right? I mean, they're working on huge global issues.
Yeah.
Poverty, healthcare, education. You can't just waltz in with a one-size-fits-all solution.
Nope. You need to build trust.
Right.
And to do that, you need to listen and understand people's needs.
Makes sense. It's like even in our own lives sometimes.
Yeah.
We try to fix things before we really even understand what the problem is.
Totally. Which actually brings us to A,
Okay, A, what's A?
authentic communication. And, the source talks about how Melinda's a really powerful communicator.
Yeah, she does seem to have a knack for getting people on board with her vision.
Right. And I think a big part of that is that she comes across as authentic.
Interesting. So it's not just about being a good speaker.
No.
It's about the genuine connection behind it.
Exactly. When you really listen to people and understand where they're coming from, you can communicate in a way that resonates and builds trust.
Right. Like you're not just trying to sell them something. You're inviting them to be part of something bigger.
Yes. And that trust, that connection, seems to be what allows her to get people behind her initiatives.
It makes sense, right?
Especially when you're talking about these huge global challenges, you need everyone working together.
Absolutely. You need that shared vision.
And this reminds me of how, during COVID, Melinda really stepped up.
Oh, yeah, that was a tough time for everyone.
Yeah, and the source talks about her resilience during that period.
Resilient leadership.
Exactly. It wasn't just about getting through the crisis. It was about finding new ways to support communities.
Right, like adapting and figuring things out on the fly.
Yeah, and that kind of resilience is something we can all relate to after the past few years, right?
Big time. I think we all had to tap into that resilience.
For sure. Okay, so we've got holistic understanding, empathetic engagement, authentic communication, and resilient leadership.
That's quite a list.
It is. And that brings us to the last part of the HEART framework.
Okay, what's the T?
T is for transformative impact.
So it's about creating lasting change.
Yes.
Not just quick fixes.
Right. It's about making a real difference in the world.
And inspiring others to do the same.
Exactly. And the source even mentions how Melinda's work goes beyond the Gates Foundation.
Really?
Yeah, she's also involved in other initiatives.
Interesting.
So it's like she's not just trying to solve problems. She's trying to change the way we think about leadership as a whole.
That's a big goal.
It is. But it seems like she's making real progress.
It's inspiring, for sure.
Okay, so we've got this amazing example of heartfelt leadership in action.
Yeah, Melinda Gates seems to embody those principles.
Right. And then we have this workbook,
Okay.
which is designed to help anyone develop these skills.
I'm kind of curious about that workbook now.
Yeah, me too.
So what's in it?
Well, it seems to be a practical guide for actually putting these ideas into practice.
Cool.
The source mentions things like enhancing your communication skills
Mm.
and fostering empathy in the workplace.
Okay, that's something we could all benefit from.
Right. And they even have a whole section on self-assessment tools and team-building activities.
Sounds very hands-on.
Yeah. And one of the case studies they use is Microsoft.
Microsoft, under Satya Nadella.
Yes.
That's fascinating. I mean, it's a tech giant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not exactly the first place you'd think of for heartfelt leadership.
Right. But apparently Nadella has really transformed the culture there.
Interesting. I'd love to hear more about that.
Me too. It shows that these principles can work anywhere.
Yeah, not just in nonprofits.
Okay, so we've got Melinda Gates as this amazing example.
Yeah.
And then we have this workbook that's like a toolkit for developing similar leadership qualities.
Sounds like a powerful combination.
Right. It's got me thinking about how I could apply these principles in my own life.
Me too. It makes you wonder, like, what kind of leader am I?
Exactly. And how can we all be more intentional about leading with heart?
That's a great question to ponder.
It is. And I think it's something our listeners might be thinking about too.
Definitely.
But before we let them go, I want to circle back to this heart framework itself.
Okay.
What stands out to you as the most powerful element?
That's a tough one.
Yeah,
They all seem so interconnected.
they do.
But if I had to pick, I think it's that empathetic engagement piece.
Oh, interesting. Why that one?
Well, it feels like the foundation of everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without that willingness to really listen and understand others,
Yeah.
none of the other elements can really work.
Right. It's like you can't have authentic communication
Mm-hmm.
if you're not actually hearing what people are saying.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it's not just about hearing the words.
Yeah.
It's about trying to see the world through their eyes.
I love that. But that's not always easy, is it?
Definitely not. Especially when we're dealing with people who are very different from us.
For sure. Like people who have different backgrounds, different beliefs.
Yeah. But I think that's where the real growth happens, right?
You mean when we're challenged to step outside of our comfort zones?
Exactly. When we have to confront our own biases.
Yeah.
And really try to understand where other people are coming from.
This makes me think about all the talk about diversity and inclusion these days,
Yeah.
but it's not enough to just have different people at the table.
Right. You have to actually create a space where they feel heard and valued.
Exactly. And that requires empathy.
Right.
It requires a willingness to not just tolerate difference, but to actually seek it out and learn from it.
You know, this reminds me of something Brené Brown said.
Oh, yeah.
She said, empathy isn't about fixing someone's problem
Okay.
or offering advice.
Mhm.
It's about simply saying, I see you, and letting them know they're not alone.
That's so powerful.
Isn't it?
And it really speaks to the power of empathy to create connection,
Yeah.
even in the most divided circumstances.
Okay, I have to ask.
Yeah.
We've been talking about leaders in, like, formal roles.
CEOs, philanthropists.
Right. But what about the rest of us?
Good question.
Can we apply these heart principles in our everyday lives, too?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're all leaders in some way, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Whether it's in our families or our communities.
Or even just with our friends.
Right. We all have opportunities to influence others.
So, like, even if we're not running a company or anything,
Yeah,
we can still practice heartfelt leadership.
totally. It starts with small things,
Like what?
like really listening to your friends when they're having a tough time,
Okay.
or trying to understand different perspectives on, like, current events.
Even if those perspectives challenge our own views.
Exactly. It's about bringing that same sense of empathy and compassion to all of our interactions.
I love that. It makes it seem much more achievable.
Right. It's not about being some kind of superhero leader.
Yeah.
It's about making small, conscious choices every day.
And those small choices can add up to make a big difference.
Exactly. Okay, my brain is buzzing with ideas right now.
Mine too.
This has been such an inspiring conversation.
It really has.
And I have a feeling our listeners are feeling inspired too.
Me too.
Yeah.
But before we let them go for now,
Yeah.
I think we should leave them with something to ponder.
Oh, I like that. What do you have in mind?
Well, we've talked a lot about Melinda Gates and this upcoming workbook, but what about looking a little closer to home?
Ooh. I like where you're going with this.
What if we all took some time to reflect on how we're showing up as leaders in our own lives?
That's good. Like in our families, with our friends, at work.
Exactly. Think about your interactions.
Yeah.
Are you embodying these heart principles?
Good question.
Where could you maybe lean in a little more?
I love that.
It's a powerful invitation to turn this outward exploration inward.
Right. Like, how can we each be a force for good in our own little corner of the world?
And remember, it doesn't require grand gestures.
Right.
Sometimes the most impactful acts of leadership are the smallest ones.
The ones that come from a place of genuine empathy.
Exactly.
Beautifully said.
You know that idea of small acts of leadership?
Yeah.
It really got me thinking
Uh,
about how leadership doesn't just happen in, big, important places.
okay.
It can happen in everyday moments, too.
Yeah, totally. Like just how we interact with people.
Exactly. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you treat the cashier
Right.
when they're clearly having a rough day?
Or how do you support a coworker who's struggling with something?
It's those little things that can actually make a big
Yeah.
difference.
And it's in those moments that this heart framework, it
Yeah.
becomes so real, so practical.
Totally. It's not just some abstract idea.
Right.
It's a way of being in the world.
And it makes me think about how the source mentions Melinda Gates
Uh-huh.
and her advocacy for paid family leave.
Okay.
And it's not just a policy issue for her, you
Right.
know.
Right.
She talks about her own experiences as a working mom.
Yeah.
And the challenges she faced.
I think that's so important.
It is.
When leaders share their personal stories,
Yeah.
it makes them more relatable.
And it shows that they understand what people are going through.
Exactly. It's like they're not just talking the talk.
Right, they're walking the walk too.
And it reminds me of how the source describes Melinda's visit to India.
Oh, yeah.
She went to this rural community,
Okay.
and she really spent time with the women there.
Not just like a quick photo op
No. She sat down and talked to them.
about their lives, their struggles, their hopes.
Right. That's real empathetic engagement in action.
It is. It's not just about showing up.
Mm-hmm.
It's about being present, listening with an open heart.
Trying to see the world through their eyes.
Exactly. You know, this makes me wonder,
What's that?
does this approach to leadership ever backfire?
Interesting question.
Like, is there ever a situation where being too empathetic could be a disadvantage?
That's a good point.
Because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
leaders have to make tough decisions.
Right. Decisions that might not please everyone.
Exactly. And I imagine that could be really hard for someone like Melinda Gates.
For sure.
Yeah.
With all the complex issues she's dealing with.
Yeah, and all the different stakeholders involved.
So many people with different perspectives.
And that's where that resilient leadership piece comes in, right?
Yeah. Got to have the strength to make a tough call,
And to stick to your values.
even when it's hard.
And I love how the source talks about Melinda's approach to failure.
Yeah. What does it say?
Well, she doesn't shy away from it.
Okay.
She embraces it. Like, she sees it as a learning opportunity.
That's so refreshing.
Isn't it? She even talks about how some of the Gates Foundation's biggest successes
Yeah.
came from projects that initially didn't go as planned.
Wow. That's a powerful message.
It is. It reminds us that leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about growing, adapting, and learning from our mistakes.
This whole heart framework,
Yeah.
it's really making me rethink what leadership means.
You too. It's not just about being in charge.
Right.
It's about so much more than that.
It's about understanding people, about connecting with them on a deeper level.
And working together to create something better.
It's funny.
What's that?
We've been focusing on CEOs and philanthropists, but leadership shows up in so many other ways, too.
Totally. Like what?
Teachers, parents, community organizers.
Artists, activists.
Yeah. Anyone who inspires others and makes a difference.
And this heart framework,
Yeah.
it's like a roadmap for anyone who wants to lead with more intention.
It reminds me of that quote.
Which one?
Leadership is not about being in charge.
Okay.
It's about taking care of the people in your charge.
I love that. It really captures the essence of what we've been talking about.
Doesn't it? Leadership is about service.
And about creating a sense of shared purpose.
Exactly. Okay, we're getting close to wrapping up this part.
Yeah.
What's one thing you hope our listeners take away from this conversation?
That's a good question.
Something they can actually put into practice.
I think the biggest takeaway is just the importance of being present. Present.
Yeah, like really present in our interactions.
Well, there.
Whether it's with our family or our colleagues or even strangers we meet on the street.
I like that.
Just approach those interactions with genuine curiosity,
Okay.
with empathy, and a willingness to listen.
Because you never know what kind of impact you might have.
Exactly.
Right.
Even the smallest moments of connection can make a difference.
It's true.
Speaking of moments of connection,
Yeah.
we're about to transition into the final part of our deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
Before we wrap up, I want to circle back to the workbook.
Yeah, the workbook.
It seems super practical.
Yeah, like a way to actually put these ideas into practice.
Right, and it even connects back to Melinda.
Oh, how so?
Like it mentions specific communication techniques she uses.
To build trust and stuff.
Exactly. Things anyone can try.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. It's like taking what she does
Yeah.
and breaking it down into steps.
And they have self-assessments, team-building activities.
Wow, so it's interactive.
Very much so.
I'm liking this workbook more and more. Me too.
Yeah.
And remember that case study about Microsoft?
Yeah, with Satya Nadella.
It shows this stuff isn't just for nonprofits.
Right. Even big companies can benefit.
It makes me think, what if we use these heart principles everywhere?
Everywhere.
Like not just at work, but at home, with friends, you know?
Interesting. Like bringing it into all parts of life.
Exactly. Could we make the world a more empathetic place that way?
It's a nice thought, isn't it?
It is. It reminds me of that proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone.
Okay.
If you want to go far, go together.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one.
And that's what leadership is really about, right?
Bringing people together towards a shared goal.
And Melinda Gates, she's clearly got that vision.
Yeah, she wants a better world for everyone.
Which is inspiring, but also a huge challenge.
Definitely not easy, that's for sure.
So as we wrap up, I want to ask our listeners,
Yeah.
what resonated with you most today?
What stuck out?
And how can you apply these principles,
Your own way.
even in small ways?
Because leadership isn't about titles.
It's about how we show up each day,
How we treat others.
how we make a difference.
Beautifully said.
And on that note, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
It's been fun exploring this with you.
Keep learning, keep leading with heart, and we'll see you next time.